It took the doctors 3 days to remind me of my name, and another 6 months to remember why I'd wanted to forget it. When I woke up, I was staring at the ceiling of a spotless hospital room that smelled like bleach and lies. My head throbbed. My ribs were bandaged. Out the window, a manicured garden glowed under morning light, so peaceful it almost convinced me I was safe. Then they walked in. A woman who said she was my wife. 2 grown men who called me Dad. Their smiles were warm, rehearsed, their eyes a shade too watchful. They hovered close, fussed over pillows, asked how I was feeling. Voices soft, movements careful. Like I was some fragile relic that might shatter if anyone raised their voice. But I didn't know them, not one of them. And beneath the morphine haze, something inside me whispered that before the accident, before the blankness, I hadn't been their victim. I'd been their target. The doctor said I'd been in a car crash. The police said it was an accident, but every time I closed my eyes I saw water, dark, rising, and hands that weren't trying to save me. My name is Alan Campbell. I'm in my late 60s, a grandfather, and for 40 years I made a living proving that the fine print bites harder than the headline. I built the practice whose law books still line the study they've already picked clean, and I know the weight of signatures and the shape of a rehearsed lie. When the woman who claimed to be my wife reached for my hand, the cool press of her fingers felt like a test. I let mine lay there, slack, pretending to be half ruined. Her wedding band matched one on my own hand. Her hair was dyed a shade of blonde that didn't suit her age. She smiled as if she had rehearsed that exact smile in a mirror. "We're so relieved you're awake," she said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. The younger of the 2 men, thick forearms, expensively trimmed beard, leaned in closer. "Dad, you gave us quite a scare. The doctors say you're lucky to be alive." My gaze drifted from their faces to the bouquet on the windowsill. Roses, still fresh, their stems cut at an angle. A small card read, "Get well soon," in handwriting that looked nothing like mine. I wondered which one of them had picked them out, or if this was all part of the performance. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my tone mild. My throat was dry, my words gravelly. Let them think I was feeble. "A car accident," the taller man answered, the one who had called me Dad with just enough warmth to sound real. "You lost control on the highway and went off the bridge. You were unconscious when we pulled you out," my supposed wife added quickly. "We were so afraid we'd lost you." Her eyes filled with tears right on cue. I made a mental note. She'd always been an actress. "You saved me?" I asked, watching their eyes. The younger one looked away. The older one gave a small nod. "Of course we did." Memory sat just out of reach, like a word on the tip of the tongue. I searched those faces, trying to find some tether to the life they insisted we shared. Nothing. No warmth, no familiarity. Only the nagging sense that these people had stood over me in a different setting, with very different intentions. They told me stories I didn't recognize. Weddings, birthdays, the birth of a grandchild with big brown eyes. They laughed and cried. They filled in the blanks of a life I couldn't remember. I listened and smiled and nodded. It was easier to let them paint a picture than to admit I suspected every brushstroke was a lie. At shift change, when the nurse came in to check my vitals, the younger man stepped into the hallway. I could hear his hushed voice just beyond the door. "The lawyer said we need him to sign the papers before he regains full capacity," he whispered. "He won't even remember," the other voice replied. "My wife. We'll explain it away like we're just managing his affairs." It's for his own good, anyway. Affairs. Papers. My heart rate monitor ticked up. The nurse glanced at the screen and tapped a button, adjusting the IV. I closed my eyes and let the morphine pull me under. But the words followed me into the darkness. I had been someone's target. Now I had to figure out whose aim had been steady enough to put me in this bed, and why they were so desperate to get me to sign away my life. As sleep pressed down, a single thought crystallized. I would let them think I was the helpless patriarch they'd tried to break. I would nod, comply, and count the days until my strength returned. Because the moment my mind was clear, I would find out who pushed me into that water, and I would make them answer for it. The doctors released me 2 weeks later with a list of medications and a physical therapist's card. My supposed wife insisted I use a wheelchair, though the discharge papers said a cane would suffice. I decided not to argue. Let them think I was weaker than I felt. The ride home was a silent procession past a life I couldn't remember. Our house, or the house they said was ours, was a sprawling ranch at the end of a gravel drive. The siding was new, the paint crisp. Potted mums lined the front steps. Inside, everything smelled of lemon polish and staged comfort. There were family photographs everywhere. Holidays, graduations, smiling faces. In each one, an older man with my jawline and eyes stood beside the woman who now fussed over my coat, the men who now hovered at my elbows. He looked content. He looked trusting. He looked nothing like the man who had awakened with water in his lungs and a question burning in his chest. They settled me into a recliner near a fireplace that crackled with gas and remote control. My wife brought me tea, then hovered as I took the first sip. No bitterness, no aftertaste. Still, I only drank half. "You should rest," she murmured. "We've arranged for a nurse to stay during the day." "And the papers?" I asked, letting my gaze wander to a stack of manila folders on the coffee table. I couldn't help it. The word had lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. The older son, David, he'd told me earlier, followed my line of sight and smiled. "Just some routine things. Updating your medical directive, making sure we can help if there's an emergency. Nothing you need to worry about right now." I nodded and pretended to fade. The nurse, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, took my pulse and adjusted my leg. When she leaned closer, her sleeve brushed the arm of my chair. "If you need anything," she whispered so low only I could hear, "press the call button twice. That's our signal. The word sent a jolt through me. I looked at her, and for a split second our eyes met in understanding. Someone on the inside still saw me as a man, not an obstacle. Days blurred. My family, if I could call them that, took turns checking on me. They brought me meals, moved me from bed to recliner, told me about the bills they were paying on my behalf. I feigned forgetfulness when convenient and clarity when it meant I could ask questions without suspicion. Late one night, as rain tapped against the windows and everyone else slept, I wheeled myself down the hallway. Muscle memory guided me more than conscious thought. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. Warm light spilled from within. My study. The room smelled of tobacco and old wood. Shelves lined the walls, filled with law books, case files, and binders labeled with my handwriting. The desk was oak, carved with the grooves of decades of work. I ran my fingers over the surface and felt a small indentation I had carved years ago by accident. Proof that this was truly my space. I opened the bottom drawer, the one that should have held the safe. Empty. Panic fluttered, but I kept my breathing steady. I checked the top drawer. Paper clips, pens, the file cabinet, mostly full of old case notes. But the drawer that once held our will and property deeds was bare. On the desk sat a single folder labeled "For Review." Inside I found photocopies of property deeds, accounts, and something more troubling. A durable power of attorney form, already filled out with my name as principal and my wife as agent. The signature line for me was blank. A pen lay atop the document like an invitation. Footsteps approached. I slid the folder back and closed the drawer with a soft click. My heart hammered in my chest as I wheeled myself back to the doorway just in time to see my wife standing in the hall. "You shouldn't be up," she said, forced concern etched across her face. "I couldn't sleep," I answered truthfully. She glanced past me at the desk, then back at me. The physical therapist will be here in the morning. You need your rest. Her tone held a note that wasn't a suggestion. I let her steer me back to the bedroom, but my mind raced. The missing safe. The blank power of attorney. The whispered conversations about signing before I regained capacity. They weren't just managing my affairs. They were positioning themselves to take everything. As she tucked the quilt around me, she whispered, "I know this is all confusing. Trust me, we're doing what's best." I smiled in the dim light and she smiled back, believing she'd won another small battle. Tomorrow, I resolved, I would make my first move. The game had only just begun. Morning came with the metallic taste of pills and the burn of determination. After breakfast, my supposed sons left for work, one to his construction firm, the other to some nebulous business that seemed to require expensive suits and vague explanations. My wife kissed my forehead and left to run errands. The nurse sat me at the kitchen table with a pile of mail and a cup of weak coffee. "You're more alert than they think," she said quietly, sorting envelopes. "You noticed?" She smiled. My grandmother had a stroke. They treated her like she was a child. She heard everything. People say more when they think you're not listening. I leaned closer. "You said to press the call button twice." She glanced down the hall. "I may not know everything that's happening here, but I know enough to see you need help. Your wife and sons have been very interested in your financial affairs. They asked me to let them know if you ever try to use the phone, so they can intercept the call." She nodded. "I have a cousin who's a paralegal. I can get you copies of any documents you sign. I appreciate that." That afternoon, I insisted on taking a short walk outside with my cane. The nurse accompanied me, her arm steady under mine. The crisp autumn air filled my lungs. At the end of the driveway sat the mailbox. I opened it and found a single envelope addressed to me in handwriting I recognized as my own. But the stamp was recent. It couldn't be my own handwriting, but it seemed very familiar. I slipped it into my jacket pocket before anyone could see. Back inside, I retreated to my room and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written before the accident. My heart pounded as I read. "Grandpa, if you're reading this, then something has gone very wrong," the first line said. "I know you trust David and Robert, but I've discovered something. They've been siphoning funds from the family trust. There are bank statements from Cayman accounts in Robert's desk drawer. And there's more. Mom isn't who she says she is. I'll explain everything when we can meet in person. Your granddaughter, Lucy. I searched my mind until an image flickered. A little girl with curly hair playing on a swing while I pushed her laugh bubbling like a creek. Another memory, her teenage face, defiant, as she argued with her father at a Thanksgiving dinner. She had always challenged the others when they tried to silence her. So it wasn't just me who had been targeted. Lucy had seen the cracks before the accident. She had tried to warn me. I hid the letter in a book on the shelf, then wheeled myself to Robert's office at the far end of the house. The door was locked. I examined the handle and saw faint scratches around the keyhole. My fingers found a small bump under the doorframe. A spare key taped underneath. I peeled it free and turned it in the lock. The office was neat to the point of sterility. Glass desk, chrome lamp, no personal photos. In the top drawer I found what looked like work files. In the second, a bundle of statements from offshore accounts, Cayman National Bank. Regular transfers from accounts in my name into these. Attached was a post-it, need Dad's signature to close. Evidence. Concrete. Undeniable evidence. I slid my phone from my pocket and snapped photos of every page. At the bottom of one statement, a name I hadn't expected. Margaret Campbell, my wife, listed as joint account holder. My head spun. They were all in on it. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. I returned the papers, locked the drawer, and slipped back into the hallway just as my wife turned the corner. "What are you doing down here?" she asked, surprise flickering across her face. Got lost, I lied, waving the cane for emphasis. This house has more hallways than I remember. She laughed, a touch strained. Come. Lunch is ready. As we ate, I smiled and spoke of nothing. Inside, a blueprint was forming. My granddaughter had seen the truth. Now it was my turn to confront it. I needed to contact her without alerting the others. I needed to gather more evidence. And I needed to remind my family that the man they were trying to con was the same man who had built careers on reading fine print and anticipating every angle. The nurse cleared the dishes. My wife chatted about community events. I nodded and planned. By nightfall, I had made a decision. Tomorrow, I would press the call button twice. It took hours to work up the nerve. The nurse's quiet promise echoed in my ears as I sat in my chair, the call button heavy in my palm. My wife had left for her yoga class. David and Robert were at work. I pressed twice, paused, then pressed again. A heartbeat later, the intercom buzzed. Yes? Came the nurse's voice. I think it's time I phoned an old friend, I said aloud for anyone listening. Then softer. Is the line clear? You're good, she whispered back. Make it quick. She wheeled the landline phone beside me and handed me the receiver. I dialed a number I found buried in the letter from Lucy, one I had memorized since, though I hadn't known whose it was. 3 rings. Then, Granddad? A young woman's voice answered, breathless. Lucy? My throat tightened. Hearing her voice brought a flood of warmth that almost undid me. I've been waiting for you to call, she said. I had to mail that letter in case something happened. Something did. They say I crashed my car. I kept my tone even. But I don't remember the road. I remember water and hands. Silence for a beat. I knew it, she whispered. I checked the weather reports. No rain that day. But your car went off the bridge near Miller's Pond. There were brake marks on the road from 2 sets of tires, not one. And the police report said Mom wasn't with you. But she was. I followed her there, Mom. Her mother was Robert's wife, Anna, the one person I hadn't seen since I woke up. Where is Anna now? She's at her sister's in Denver. Convenient timing. Lucy's anger crackled down the line. Granddad, they've been planning this for months. The accident was their way of accelerating it. They thought if you died, the trust would transfer to them. When you didn't, they decided to get you to sign it away. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I found statements. Accounts in the Caymans. My signature forged. Your grandmother's name, I have more, she said. Emails, messages between Mom and Uncle David about Project Golden Years. They joked about moving you into a care facility as soon as the paperwork was complete. You need to see them. We need a safe place to meet, I said. Where they won't think to look. She considered. What about the cabin at Bear Ridge? The one we used to fish at? They never liked going there. Memory, a small cabin by a lake, fishing lines cast from the dock, the smell of pine and coffee. That will work. Tomorrow at noon? I'll be there. Be careful, I warned. If they suspect, they already think I'm trouble, she said with a wry laugh. I've been banned from family dinners since I confronted Dad about the missing funds. I have nothing to lose. The nurse tapped her watch. I told Lucy I loved her. The words felt strange yet right on my tongue. As I hung up, the front door opened. I slid my expression into one of fatigue. David strode in, his tie loosened, cell phone pressed to his ear. Yes, I'll get him to sign this afternoon, he said to whoever was on the other end. The notary will be here at 3. My heart kicked against my ribs. 3. They'd arranged the meeting sooner than I'd anticipated. Dad, he said, ending the call. Feeling up for a bit of paperwork? What paperwork? I asked innocently. Just standard stuff. Transferring some accounts into joint names to avoid estate taxes. Protecting you. He smiled. His teeth were white and even. I wondered if he had always been this smooth or if greed had sharpened his charm. "Of course," I said. "Whatever you think is best." Inside, I recalculated. The meeting at Bear Ridge would have to wait. First, I had to survive the notary's visit without giving them what they wanted. And maybe, just maybe, I could turn it into an opportunity. At precisely 3 o'clock, a woman with a briefcase arrived. She introduced herself as Linda, the notary. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. David and Robert flanked her like sentries. My wife hovered near the doorway. The nurse offered everyone coffee and retreated to the kitchen, leaving me alone with my predators. Linda unfolded a document and slid it across the table. "This is a durable power of attorney," she explained. "It will grant your wife the ability to handle your financial and legal matters should you be incapacitated." "But I'm not incapacitated," I pointed out mildly. Robert chuckled. "Dad, you've been through a lot." "This is just a precaution. You trust Mom, don't you?" Trust. Such a heavy word, tossed about like a ball. I picked up the document and pretended to skim it. I had drafted hundreds of these for clients over the years. This one looked standard, except for the clause buried on page 3 that allowed the agent to make gifts to herself without limitation. "What happens if I don't sign?" I asked, looking up. My wife's smile tightened. "Then we'll have to go to court to obtain guardianship. That could be public and embarrassing. Let's avoid that, shall we?" Linda's pen hovered over the paper, poised to witness my signature. I coughed, my ribs aching with the movement. "I'd like my attorney to review this first." "We talked to your attorney," David said quickly. "He said it was fine." "Which attorney?" I asked, tilting my head. "I've had several over the years. There's Jim, my partner from the firm. There's Frank, who handles my trusts. Or maybe you spoke to Bill, who's been disbarred for 3 years. Robert's mouth opened, then closed. They hadn't thought I'd remember names. They hadn't planned for resistance. Anger flickered across my wife's features before she smoothed them out. Linda shifted in her seat. "Mr. Campbell, it's your right to have counsel." "We can reschedule." David's hand shot out, grabbing the document. "No, let's just—" "We'll reschedule," I said firmly, my voice carrying more authority than I'd used since waking up. "I'm grateful for your concern, but I won't sign anything until Jim looks at it." A muscle worked in David's jaw. For a moment I saw the boy he had been, stubborn, used to getting his way. Then the mask slipped back into place. "Fine," he said, forcing a laugh. "We're just trying to help." I leaned back. "I know." Linda packed her briefcase. My wife walked her to the door, whispering something urgent. When she returned, her eyes were hard. "You're being difficult," she said under her breath. "I've been through worse," I murmured back. She glared but said nothing. That night I waited until the house was quiet. I put on an old coat I found in the closet. It smelled like cedar and rain, and slipped out the back door. My cane tapped softly on the flagstones as I made my way to the detached garage. Inside, under a canvas tarp, sat a truck. My truck. I ran my hand over the metal and found the spare key hidden above the wheel well. When I turned the ignition, the engine coughed, then roared to life. I drove with the headlights off until I reached the road. The night was clear, the moon high. Memories tugged at the edges of my mind. Long drives, country roads, teaching my children to shift gears. I focused on the present. I had to make it to Bear Ridge before dawn. Lucy would be waiting at noon, but I needed time to prepare. As I drove, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Police reopened your crash case. Officer Ramos has questions. Call him." I frowned. Another complication. But help was help, no matter the source. The cabin at Bear Ridge sat at the edge of a small lake. Pines towered on all sides, their silhouettes black against the stars. I parked behind a stand of trees and killed the engine. Inside, dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight. The furniture was simple, the kitchen stocked with canned goods and fishing gear. In the bedroom, An old trunk held what I'd hoped it would. A recorder, left from days when I'd documented depositions. I tested it. The red light blinked obediently. Good. On the porch, I sat and waited. The night air smelled of pine and damp earth. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. My mind raced through contingencies. Lucy would arrive with evidence. We would review it, copy it, and then decide how to confront the others. I thought about Officer Ramos. If the police were reopening the case, that meant someone else suspected foul play. Perhaps I could turn that to my advantage. The first hint of dawn touched the tops of the trees. I closed my eyes and saw water again. Dark, cold, rising around me. This time the hands pushing me were clearer. They were large, strong, familiar. The ring on the left hand flashed as it broke the surface. It was not my wife's hand. The mystery was about to get a lot darker. But before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Lucy arrived at noon, just as she said she would, driving an old hatchback that sputtered as it came up the driveway. She hopped out, her curls tied back, a backpack slung over one shoulder. The moment she saw me on the porch, her face broke into a relieved smile. "Granddad," she said, rushing up the steps. She hugged me without hesitation, holding on longer than I expected. The scent of her shampoo, lavender and something else, tugged at more dormant memories. I hugged her back, feeling the warmth of family without pretense. "You look just like your grandmother when she was your age," I said, and she laughed, wiping away a tear. "I'll take that as a compliment." "Come inside." I brought my laptop and everything we need inside. She spread out papers and a flash drive on the table. "These are copies of Dad's emails with Uncle David and Grandma," she said, voice low and fierce. "They call it Project Golden Years. They discuss transferring your businesses into shell companies, then selling them off. They talk about how to get you declared incompetent if you resist." She opened an email dated 2 weeks before my accident. Robert wrote, "We should do it during the fishing trip. Less witnesses. Make it look like he swerved to avoid a deer." Margaret replied, "Once the accounts transfer, we'll finally be free." David added, "Don't forget to disable the dash cam. The boat ramp is steep." She also played 2 saved voice messages, David and Margaret, on speakerphone, talking about the deer, the boat ramp, and disabling the dash cam. My stomach lurched. They had plotted my death like a business transaction. A deer, a dash cam, a boat ramp. My hands trembled as I scrolled through more. David had emailed a mechanic about loosening something on my truck. Margaret had contacted a probate attorney about expedited estate transfers. Anna had searched, "How long after drowning before body found?" "We need to bring this to the police," I said, my voice steady only through force of will. "I thought so too," Lucy answered. "But they have friends on the force." Officer Ramos is different. He's younger, from the city. He wasn't going to investigate until I showed him these. He told me to get you away and gather everything. He's meeting us here at 2. "You told him to come here?" Panic flared. "Lucy, if they find out—" "They won't." I hacked into the security cameras at home. They're all at a charity luncheon. We have time. She held up her wrist to show me a smartwatch displaying live feeds of my front porch. Empty. I exhaled. "You've grown into quite the detective," she grinned. "Turns out being grounded in high school for hacking the school system taught me useful skills." Her face sobered. "There's something else." "Mom. Anna. She's not just away visiting. She filed for divorce from Dad 3 days after your accident. She's seeking half of everything, claiming he's unstable. So the conspirators are turning on each other." "Exactly. And Mom thinks she's safe because she wasn't there when the car went off the road. But she knew. She encouraged it. The more I learned, the more the ground shifted under me. Betrayal layered upon betrayal. If they were willing to sacrifice me, they'd sacrifice each other. Maybe that was the leverage I needed. At 2 o'clock sharp, a dark sedan pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out. Officer Ramos was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes and a cautious demeanor. He introduced himself and asked to see what we had. Lucy handed him the flash drive and papers. He whistled softly as he read. "This is substantial," he murmured. "Enough to open a case for sure. But there's a problem. Your wife's brother is the district attorney. He'll bury this if it comes through official channels." "Then what do we do?" I asked. "We need to catch them in the act," Ramos said. "If they think you're going to sign the power of attorney, they'll gather. We can wire the room, record their conversation. If they discuss the accident or the fraud, it will be hard to deny." "They already tried to get me to sign," I told him. "I refused." "Then we give them a second chance," Lucy suggested. "We tell them you've changed your mind. Invite them somewhere safe. We'll be hidden, recording everything. Once they incriminate themselves, Officer Ramos can arrest them on the spot." It was a bold plan, dangerous, but my legal mind ticked through the variables and found it sound. "They'll expect a notary," I said, "and they'll want the documents prepared. I can draft something that looks like a power of attorney but includes a clause revoking itself upon certain admissions." The old corporate poison pill Ramos raised an eyebrow. "You can do that?" "I wrote contracts for 40 years, I replied. "I've hidden more than one trap in legal jargon." Lucy squeezed my hand. "Are you sure you're up for this, Granddad?" "They tried to kill you. You'll be sitting in a room with them, pretending to be gullible." I thought of the lake, the water closing over my head, the hands pushing me down. I thought of the man I used to be, blinded by trust. "I'm up for it," I said. "For me. For you. For justice." The plan took shape. Ramos would set up surveillance. Lucy would keep watch on our conspirators. I would draft the document and lure them in. The stage was set. But as we hammered out the details, my phone buzzed. A message from my wife. "Don't do anything stupid. We know where you are." I showed Lucy. Her face drained of color. "They must have a tracker on your truck," she whispered. Outside, gravel crunched under approaching tires. I peered through the cabin window as dust swirled up the driveway. 2 SUVs appeared between the trees, both black, both gleaming. My heart clenched. David, Robert, and my wife climbed out, their expressions a mixture of anger and feigned concern. Behind them, 2 large men I didn't recognize stepped out, bodyguards. They were taking no chances. Officer Ramos cursed under his breath. "We need more time," he hissed, sliding his gun from his holster. "I didn't expect them to move so fast." "There's no time for wiring," I whispered back. "We'll have to improvise." I grabbed the old recorder from the table and slipped it into my pocket. It wouldn't capture everything, but it was better than nothing. Lucy looked at me, fear and defiance warring in her eyes. "Granddad, are you sure?" "Stay in the bedroom," I ordered. "Keep the door closed. If anything happens, go out the back window and run to Ramos's car." She hesitated, then nodded, disappearing into the back room. Officer Ramos positioned himself near the kitchen entrance, out of sight, but close enough to act. He'd already radioed for backup. 2 cruisers were cutting across the ridge road. I took a breath and opened the door as my family reached the porch. "What a surprise," I said, forcing my face into an approximation of warmth. "Dad, what are you doing here?" David demanded, pushing past me. "We were worried sick when we found your truck gone." "You tracked me," I said mildly. "You must really care." Robert scanned the room. "Why are the police here?" He spotted Ramos's badge clipped to his belt. "Are you under investigation, officer?" "I'm here at Mr. Campbell's invitation," Ramos replied smoothly. "He requested extra security for a family meeting." My wife's lips thinned. "We don't need strangers in our family business." "On the contrary," I said, gesturing to the table. "We have quite a bit to discuss. Please sit." They exchanged glances. The bodyguard stayed by the door. David and Robert sat reluctantly. My wife remained standing, arms crossed. "First," I began, pulling the faux power of attorney from my folder, "I owe you an apology. I've been stubborn. You wanted to help manage my affairs, and I resisted. It's time I let go and accept your guidance." Their eyes lit with greedy relief. David reached for the document, but I held it just out of reach. "There's one condition," I said, letting the bait dangle. "I need to know everything. Full transparency. Why do you need this? What's your plan for the businesses? For the properties? For the trust?" Robert glanced at our mother. She gave a slight nod. He leaned back and smiled like a snake. "Dad, it's simple. You're old. You're forgetful. The company needs fresh leadership. We've already found buyers for some of the assets. Once you sign, we can finalize those deals." "What assets?" "The commercial properties," David chimed in, unable to hide his excitement. "The manufacturing division. The vacation homes. We'll liquidate, invest in higher yield funds. You'll live comfortably in a care facility. No more stress." "A care facility?" I repeated softly. My wife stepped forward. "You need professional care, Alan. We can't risk another accident. Besides, you'll have everything you need. We'll visit." Her tone dripped with false sweetness. "Is that why you loosened the brake line on my truck?" I asked, tilting my head. The room went still. Color drained from Robert's face. "What are you talking about?" "Is that why you disabled the dash cam?" I continued. "Why you chose the route by the lake? Why you emailed each other about deer and boat ramps?" My wife recovered first. "He's confused," she snapped. "See? He makes up stories. This is why he needs a guardian." I pulled the recorder from my pocket and pressed play. The crackle of audio filled the room. David's and Margaret's voices from Lucy's saved messages. Their laughter about my trusting nature, their detailed plans to stage my accident, their calculations of my net worth. "What is this?" David whispered, horrified. "Proof," I said, letting the word hang heavy. "Proof that my family conspired to murder me." Officer Ramos stepped fully into the room, badge held high. "I've heard enough," he declared. "David Campbell, Robert Campbell, Margaret Campbell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and elder abuse." Panic erupted. My wife lunged toward me, eyes wild. "You think you can do this to us?" she screamed. "We did everything for you." One of the bodyguards moved, hand dipping under his jacket. Ramos drew his firearm in a fluid motion. "Don't," he warned, voice steady. The guard froze. David's face twisted between rage and fear. "Dad, you don't understand." "It was Mom's idea." "We just went along, coward," Robert spat at him. "It was your plan. You called it Project Golden Years." They turned on each other in seconds, the veneer of unity shattering into blame and accusations. Behind the bedroom door, I heard Lucy's sharp intake of breath. Ramos and his fellow officers cuffed them, reading them their rights. The bodyguards were disarmed and detained. Later they were released. No evidence they'd known the plan. My wife glared at me as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You think the law can protect you?" I met her gaze. The woman I had married decades ago seemed like a stranger. "I don't need protection from the law," I said quietly. "I need the law to protect others from you." As the officers led them out, rain began to fall. Soft at first, then harder. They were loaded into the SUVs they'd arrived in, now police vehicles. For a moment, as the patrol lights flashed red and blue across the pines, I felt nothing but exhaustion. But the game was not over. Their arrest was only the first move. Their brother-in-law was still the district attorney. The wealth they'd stolen was hidden, and the fallout would ripple through my family like a hurricane. Lucy emerged from the bedroom, eyes wide. "You did it," she whispered. "We did," I corrected. "But we're not done yet." Outside, thunder rumbled, and I knew the storm had only just begun. The aftermath hit like a tidal wave. News traveled fast in our town. By evening, headlines blared. Prominent family arrested in alleged murder plot. Commentators speculated on motives. Neighbors whispered. Some offered sympathy. Others reveled in the scandal. At the county jail, David, Robert, and Margaret spent their first night behind bars. Officer Ramos kept me informed. "They're blaming each other," he said over the phone. "Margaret's lawyer is arguing she was coerced. David insists he tried to stop the plan. Robert claims mental instability. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks." Lucy stayed at the cabin with me. We watched the coverage together, each report peeling away another layer of our family's public image. "What happens now?" she asked, hugging her knees to her chest. "Now we make sure they can't wriggle out," I replied. "We gather every document, every recording, every statement. We file civil suits to freeze their assets before they can be moved. We contact trustworthy media so their story doesn't get buried by favors." "And Mom?" she whispered, eyes shining. She wasn't here, but she knew. "Do you want her arrested too?" I thought of Anna, my daughter-in-law, who had once baked me pies and called me Dad. If she was involved, she must face consequences. But I also want to understand why. Sometimes understanding helps with healing. Justice does not preclude compassion. The next morning, my attorney, Jim, met us at the cabin. He was grayer than I remembered, but his mind was as sharp as ever. "Alan," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I'm sorry you're going through this. But I'm glad you finally let me in." I told him everything. The accident, the stolen funds, the emails, the arrest. He listened without interrupting, jotting notes in his leather-bound notebook. "We'll file to revoke the power of attorney immediately," he said when I finished. "We'll freeze all joint accounts. We'll seek court approval to dissolve any shell companies. But be prepared. Margaret's brother will fight this. He has influence." "Influence doesn't override murder," Lucy said bitterly. Jim nodded. "True, but it can muddy the water. We need to stay vigilant. Also, Alan, there's something else." He hesitated. "Your will currently leaves everything to Margaret and your sons. We need to update it." I sighed, feeling the weight of decades of assumptions. "Yes, I want to set up a trust for my grandchildren, Lucy and her cousins, and I want to include provisions for Anna if she cooperates, but nothing for those who conspired against me." "Understood." He flipped to a blank page. "We'll draft it today." We should also prepare for the possibility of retaliation. Margaret's family has resources. They may hire private investigators, intimidate witnesses. We need restraining orders. As Jim spoke, my phone buzzed again. "Unknown number. Heard about your family. This isn't over. Watch your back." I showed the text to Jim. He frowned. "We need to change your number." And increased security, Ramos agreed. He arranged for patrol cars to pass by the cabin and my home. He also suggested I obtain a temporary firearm. "You have the right to protect yourself," he said. "But I hope you won't need it." That evening, after Jim left and Ramos returned to town, Lucy and I sat on the porch. The lake reflected the pink streaks of sunset. She shivered and pulled her jacket tighter. "Do you think Grandma ever loved you?" she asked suddenly. The question hit with unexpected force. I stared at the water, my mind drifting back decades, to our early days, to laughter, to quiet nights. "I think she did," I said slowly. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Greed, fear, resentment, I don't know. Love can erode when people stop tending to it. Lucy nodded, tears tracking down her cheeks. "I don't know if Dad ever loved me. He always wanted a son. I was the disappointment. Maybe that's why he listened to Grandma. I reached over and took her hand. His failures are his own. Your worth is not measured by his love. She squeezed my hand back. Promise me something, Granddad. Anything. Don't let this destroy you. You're angry and you deserve to be. But don't become like them. Don't let revenge be all you have. Her words were wise beyond her years. I looked at her and saw the future, not the past. I promise, I said. We sat in silence as the last light faded, each lost in our own thoughts. Somewhere in the distance, a twig snapped. My heart jumped. Then an animal darted across the clearing. A deer, free and oblivious to the weight of our human dramas. Court proceedings began several months later. Margaret, David, and Robert were arraigned, pleading not guilty. The courtroom buzzed with reporters and onlookers. Margaret's brother, District Attorney Hayes, sat in the front row of the gallery, his jaw tight. He had recused himself from the case, but his presence was a message. My family sat on the opposite side of the aisle from me. Only Lucy remained by my side, her hand firm in mine. Anna had returned from Denver and sat behind her brothers, eyes red but jaw set. When she met my gaze, there was no malice, only exhaustion. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, set the trial date and denied bail for my wife and sons due to the severity of the charges and risk of flight. As they were led away in handcuffs, Margaret caught my eye. Her expression held something foreign, maybe regret, maybe rage. It was hard to tell. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, microphones thrust toward me, voices overlapping. Mr. Campbell, do you have a statement? Is it true your sons planned to kill you? How do you feel about your wife's betrayal? I lifted a hand. Justice will take its course, I said. I have faith in the system. As Lucy and I pushed through the crowd, a man stepped into our path. He was in his 40s, with a squared jaw and cold eyes. Mr. Campbell? He asked, blocking our way. Name's Victor Hayes. Margaret's brother, District Attorney Hayes's voice was as slick as oil. You think you've won? This is far from over. My sister may have made mistakes, but she is not a monster. You think I'll let you destroy my family's reputation? Your sister conspired to murder me, I replied calmly. Her reputation is her own doing. His eyes narrowed. Be careful, he said, leaning closer. You're not the only one who knows how to play dirty. He walked away before I could respond. Lucy squeezed my arm. He's threatening you, she hissed. Isn't that illegal? Not in so many words, I said, but its clear lines are being drawn. We'll need more than evidence. We'll need public pressure, transparency. If he tries to bury the case, we make sure the whole town knows. Over the next few weeks, that's exactly what we did. With Jim's guidance, we filed civil suits in federal court, where Hayes had less influence. We reached out to journalists who investigated corruption. We created a secure website where documents related to the case could be accessed by the public. We explained, carefully and legally, our side of the story. The court of public opinion can be fickle, but when presented with proof, even skeptics shifted. At home, I hired security for the first time in my life. 2 retired state troopers took shifts watching the house and the cabin. Ramos kept me updated on any suspicious activity. A dark car parked near my driveway for an hour one night. When approached, it sped away. A lawyer visited Anna, urging her to testify against me. She refused. It seemed my resolve had inspired hers. One evening, Anna herself knocked on my door. She looked worn, a shadow of the woman who had once hosted lavish dinners. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table, a pot of coffee between us. "I didn't know they were going to kill you," she said, voice cracking. "I knew they were scheming. I knew they resented you. But I thought it was just about money. Then Mom told me, and I left. I should have called the police. I'm sorry." Tears streamed down her face. Why did you go along with any of it? I asked gently. She stared at her hands. I never felt like I belonged in this family. Margaret made sure of that. David was always Mama's boy. Robert treated me like a trophy. I thought if I had financial security, I could finally leave. I never thought they'd... She broke off, shaking. Will you testify? I asked. She looked up, eyes swollen. Yes. I don't care what Hayes threatens. I have to do the right thing. I reached across the table and took her hand. Thank you. After Anna left, Lucy and I updated Jim and Ramos. Her testimony could be the final nail in their coffin, Jim said, but it also makes her a target. We'll protect her, Ramos promised. As we hung up, a heavy fatigue settled over me. My family's betrayal had splintered my past, but now the future depended on choices we made each day. I thought about the man I used to be, trusting, perhaps naive. Had my blindness been partly to blame? Could I have seen this coming? Would things have been different if I'd been more present, less consumed by work? That night, I dreamed of water again. But this time, instead of struggling alone, I saw a hand reach into the dark and pull me up. It was Lucy's hand, and behind her stood Anna, Ramos, Jim. A small army of people choosing to stand on the side of right, even as others tried to drag us down. Trial day arrived like a cold wind. The courthouse was packed. Security was tight. News vans lined the street. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The murmurs hushed. The prosecution presented a meticulous timeline of the conspiracy. They played our recordings, displayed our evidence, and called witnesses, including me. When the bailiff called my name, I felt the weight of every step as I walked to the witness stand. I took the oath and sat, hands clasped to hide the tremor. Mr. Campbell, the prosecutor began, can you describe your relationship with the defendants prior to the incident? I spoke clearly, simply. Margaret is my wife of 32 years. David and Robert are my sons. I raised them. I provided for them. I loved them. My voice wavered on the last word, but I did not let it crack. And how did you discover their plot? I recounted the accident, the hospital, the missing papers, Lucy's letter, the emails, the meeting at the cabin. The courtroom was silent except for my voice and the scratch of the court reporter's pen. Then came the cross-examination. Hayes's second-in-command rose, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Campbell, he said with professional politeness, is it true you suffered a head injury? That you have memory gaps? I had a concussion, I admitted. But my memory returned, and our evidence does not rely solely on recollection. He smiled like a shark. Is it possible your confusion led you to misinterpret your family's intentions? Perhaps they were concerned about your health, not conspiring against you. I met his gaze. They discussed disabling my truck. They joked about inheritance. They emailed about killing me. Concern looks very different. He leaned forward. Isn't it true that you've long been controlling? That your sons felt smothered? Couldn't their Project Golden Years have been an unfortunate joke about retirement? I saw some jurors shift, planting doubt. I took a breath. I may have been controlling. I may have expected much, but jokes don't involve loosening brake lines or forging signatures. I taught my sons to take responsibility for their actions. Today is no exception. When Anna took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. She testified about the conversations she had overheard, the pressure Margaret exerted, the emails she read. Hayes's team tried to paint her as scorned and unreliable. She held firm, her voice clear. I'm here because my conscience demanded it, she said. I could not live with myself if I stayed silent. Lucy testified next, her chin high. She spoke of her own estrangement from her father, of the letter she sent me, of the live footage she hacked. The defense tried to discredit her by bringing up her teenage hacking suspension. She smiled. I was punished for that, and I learned from it. Without those skills, my grandfather might be dead. Do we punish skills or misuse of them? The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witness after witness painted a picture of greed and entitlement. The defense floundered, grasping at straws. Hayes's influence could not suppress public scrutiny or the weight of evidence. Finally, the jury deliberated. 8 hours later, they returned. We find the defendants guilty on all counts. Margaret collapsed into her chair. David stared straight ahead, tears streaming silently down his face. Robert cursed under his breath. The judge sentenced them to 25 years to life, with no chance of parole for at least 15. Relief washed over me, followed by a hollow sadness. Justice had prevailed, but justice is not joy. My family, the people I had built my life around, were led away in chains. My grandchildren would grow up visiting their parents in prison. The ripple effects would touch many innocent lives. Outside the courthouse, I gave a statement. There are no winners today, I said, only lessons. Let us remember that greed cannot be allowed to rot the foundations of family. Hayes glowered from across the steps. He spoke to reporters about appealing, about corruption, about vengeance. I ignored him. He no longer held any power over me. My focus was elsewhere, on healing, on rebuilding, on choosing who would share my future. With the trial behind us, a quiet descended. The house felt different, lighter in some ways, emptier in others. I spent mornings reviewing business matters with Jim, dissolving companies my sons had created, redirecting funds back into the trust. Afternoons were for physical therapy. My ribs still ached, and my legs remained unsteady. Evenings I cooked simple meals with Lucy, learning the rhythm of a life without pretense. One day, as we prepared dinner, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened it to find my younger granddaughter, Emily, standing on the porch. She was 18, with her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. "Hi, Grandpa," she said softly. "Emily," I said, surprised but pleased. "Come in." She stepped inside, hesitant. "Dad wanted me to visit you. He said he's sorry." My heart squeezed. "Sit," I said, guiding her to the table. "Tell me." She unfolded a piece of paper. It was a letter in David's handwriting delivered from prison. He wrote of regret, of being blinded by our mother's influence, of feeling inadequate and greedy. He asked for forgiveness. He begged me to look after his daughters, to tell them he loved them. Tears blurred my vision. "He made terrible choices," I said, voice thick. "But he is still your father. I will always speak of the good he once did, and I will always love you." Emily sniffled. "Do you forgive him?" "Forgiveness is not a door you walk through once. It's a path you must choose every day." "I am working on it," I answered honestly. "Some days it's easier, others harder. But I know hate will poison me, and I have no more room for poison." She nodded, relief flickering in her eyes. "Can we still come here?" "Lucy says, you're making pancakes on Sundays again." I smiled. "Every Sunday, and there's always room for one more." After she left, I sat on the porch with my coffee. The sun warmed my face. Birds chirped. Life continued. And though scars remained, new growth sprouted around them. A week later, Hayes was indicted on obstruction of justice. He had attempted to use his influence to suppress evidence. Public outrage forced him to resign. He accepted a plea deal. Watching his downfall, I felt nothing. Revenge was satisfying for a moment, then empty. I reminded myself of Lucy's words. "Don't let revenge be all you have." I channeled my energy elsewhere. I reconnected with old friends. I volunteered at the community legal aid clinic, using my skills to help those who couldn't afford representation. I started a scholarship in my late wife's name for single parents pursuing education. I had lost her image over the years, but her values remained. Honoring them felt right. One evening, Anna joined us for dinner. She brought a casserole and awkwardly stood in the doorway until Lucy pulled her in. We ate, talked, laughed. Healing rarely comes in grand gestures. It comes in shared meals and small steps. As we cleared dishes, Anna turned to me. "I applied for a job at the library," she said. "Part-time. To start over." "That's wonderful," I replied. "You'll be great." She looked at me, gratitude shining. "Thank you for not turning your back on me." I shook my head. We all took wrong turns. The important thing is we find our way back. That night, I wrote a new will. It distributed my assets fairly among my grandchildren with stipulations for education and health. It appointed Lucy as executor. It left a small bequest to Anna with a note. "You chose to stand for truth. Use this to build a new life." It left nothing to those who had betrayed me. Writing it, I felt a sense of closure, not revenge, but boundary setting. My agency restored. Winter set in early that year, bringing with it a hush that draped over the town. Snow covered the pines around the cabin, turning the world into a clean slate. I spent more time there, chopping wood, reading by the fire, thinking. Occasionally, I'd bring a case file from the clinic, enjoying the structure of legal arguments. Other times, I'd simply sit and let the silence hold me. One afternoon, a knock shattered the quiet. I opened the door to find Victor Hayes standing on my porch. He looked different, tired, disheveled, no entourage, no suit. His eyes were bloodshot. "You're trespassing," I said, keeping my hand on the doorframe. He raised his hands. "I come in peace," he said hoarsely. "May I speak with you?" Every instinct screamed to slam the door, but curiosity edged out caution. "5 minutes," I said. "Outside." He nodded and stuffed his hands in his pockets, breath forming clouds in the cold air. I wanted to say, "You were right," he began, staring at the frozen lake. "My sister, she confessed everything. She told me how she convinced the boys, how she'd been siphoning money for years. I didn't see it, or maybe I didn't want to." He swallowed hard. "I tried to help her. I abused my power. Now I'm stripped of my position. I've lost my career. My wife left me. My kids won't speak to me. And Margaret, she won't even look at me when I visit." He laughed bitterly. "Funny, isn't it? We built our lives on family loyalty, and it destroyed us." I watched him, measuring his words. There was no gloating in me, only a distant sympathy. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Nothing." He shook his head. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, because I was wrong. I thought you were punishing my sister. You were saving yourself. And in the end, you saved us from our own rot. Maybe now our children will grow up differently." Snowflakes began to fall, soft and steady. Silence stretched between us. "You have a lot to repair," I said finally. "Start with yourself. Then your family. That's all you can do." He nodded, tears glistening. "Thank you," he whispered. He turned and walked down the driveway, leaving footprints in the snow that filled in almost as soon as they were made. I closed the door and leaned against it, emotions swirling. Forgiveness is complicated. It doesn't condone. It doesn't forget. It acknowledges harm and chooses not to let it dictate the future. I wasn't sure if I had forgiven Margaret or my sons yet, but perhaps one day. Victor's apology was a step toward healing. Not just for him, but for me. Later that night, as the wind howled outside, I wrote in my journal, "Betrayal can make you bitter, or it can carve out space for grace. Which will you choose?" I didn't know yet. But the question was important. Spring arrived, tentative at first, then in full green flourish. Daffodils pushed through the thawed earth near the porch, their yellow heads nodding in the breeze. With the changing seasons came the sense that life could be new again. I had regained much of my strength. Physical therapy had done its work. I could walk without a cane, drive without fear. One morning, I woke early and decided to visit the lake where my accident had occurred. Closure, I told myself. Lucy insisted on coming along. We loaded into my truck and drove in silence, the road familiar and haunted. The bridge loomed ahead, its rails repaired since the crash. We parked near the edge and walked to the spot where tire marks once marred the asphalt. The water below was calm, reflecting the sky like a mirror. "This is where everything changed," Lucy murmured, wrapping her arms around herself. I nodded. I leaned against the railing and let my gaze drift over the water. I saw the image from my dreams. Dark waves closing over me, hands pushing me down. Then another image. Hands pulling me up. Lucy's hands, Ramos's hands, Anna's, Jim's, even Victor's in a way. Hands of strangers and loved ones who refused to let me drown in betrayal. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. I had worn it for 32 years. Even after the trial, I couldn't bring myself to remove it. It represented love that had once been real, even if later corrupted. Now, as sunlight sparkled on the water, I felt ready. "Are you sure?" Lucy asked softly. I slipped the ring off my finger. It felt lighter than I expected. "Yes," I said. "This doesn't symbolize what it once did. It symbolizes lies and control. I don't need it anymore." I threw it into the lake. It made the smallest splash, a tiny disturbance that rippled outward. We watched the circle spread, then disappear. Letting go is not a moment. It's a series of choices. Today, I chose to release a token. Tomorrow, perhaps, I would release something deeper. On the drive back, Lucy reached across the seat and squeezed my hand. "What will you do now?" she asked. I considered. "I'll keep working at the clinic. I'll spend time with my grandchildren. I'll fish more. I'll read books I never had time for. Maybe I'll travel. I've always wanted to see the northern lights." She smiled. "That sounds wonderful. And you?" "I got accepted into law school," she said, eyes sparkling. "I want to become a lawyer. Like you. But maybe better." Pride swelled in my chest. "You will be," I said, "and I'll be there cheering you on." Back at the house, we joined Emily and Anna for Sunday pancakes. We laughed over burned edges and uneven stacks. We shared stories of resilience. We made plans for holidays that included everyone who wanted to be there. We set boundaries with clarity and love. We created new traditions from the ashes of old ones. As the day ended and my family left, I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the quiet. I wasn't lonely. The house no longer echoed with lies. It resonated with possibilities. I wiped the counter and smiled. This was a new chapter, one I was writing consciously. Months passed. News cycles moved on. New scandals replaced ours. My name slowly stopped being associated with betrayal and returned to being associated with the legal clinic and community service. I spoke at a conference on elder abuse, sharing my story to help others protect themselves. People approached me afterward with tears in their eyes, grateful for my candor. One day, a letter arrived from prison. The envelope was thin, the handwriting familiar. It was from Robert. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Dad," it began, "I know you have no reason to believe me or care. But I need to say this. I'm sorry. I blamed you for my failures. I resented your expectations. I let Mom feed my grievances until they turned into something monstrous. That day at the lake, when I pushed you, I thought I would feel free. But as soon as I did it, I felt hollow. Every night in this cell, I see your face. I see what I did. There is no justification, only regret. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand the weight of my actions." Tears dripped onto the paper. I set the letter down and took a breath. Pain and compassion warred inside me. My son had tried to kill me. He was now expressing remorse. It didn't erase the crime, but it acknowledged it. That acknowledgment mattered. I wrote back. "Robert," I began, "I read your letter. I appreciate your apology. It does not undo what happened, but it is a step. I am working on forgiving you. It will take time. Focus on becoming the man your children can be proud of, even from behind bars. That will be your redemption." I mailed it without expectation. Forgiveness may never be complete, but offering a hand to someone drowning in guilt was a choice I wanted to make. In midsummer, Lucy left for law school. We packed her car with boxes and books. "Promise me you won't work too hard," she joked, hugging me tight. "Promise me you'll take breaks," I countered, "and call often." She pulled back, eyes gleaming. "You know I will." As I watched her drive away, I felt the bittersweet ache of letting go. She was stepping into her own story, shaped in part by our family's reckoning but not defined by it. I was proud beyond measure. That fall, I did something I never thought I'd do. I joined a grief and forgiveness support group. Sitting in a circle with strangers, I shared my story, listened to theirs, and found common ground. We were all grappling with hurt inflicted by those we loved. We cried, we laughed, we grew. At one meeting, a woman said, "Forgiveness isn't saying what they did was okay. It's saying I won't let it control me." That resonated. Each time anger flared, I repeated her words. Slowly, the flame dimmed. I traveled to see the northern lights that winter. Standing under the shimmering sky in Norway, I felt small in the best way. The universe stretched vast and brilliant above me, a reminder that my story was but one thread in a tapestry of infinite complexity. Betrayal, justice, revenge, forgiveness, all human experiences repeated across time. I breathed in the crisp air and let peace settle. Years slip by in the way years do when you're no longer measuring them by court dates and trial schedules. My hair thinned and whitened. My hands grew more spotted. But my mind remained sharp, and my heart, though scarred, beat strong. Lucy graduated law school and joined the clinic. She fought for those who had no voice, drawing on our story to warn clients about guardianship abuse and financial exploitation. Her passion inspired the next generation of lawyers. Emily pursued social work, helping families navigate trauma. Anna became head librarian, finding joy in connecting children with stories. Even Victor Hayes spoke at our clinic once, sharing his cautionary tale of arrogance and downfall. Robert and David remained in prison. They applied for parole after 15 years and were denied. In their letters, I saw growth, regret, acceptance. I visited them occasionally, not out of obligation, but as part of my own healing. Our conversations were awkward, then gradually honest. We spoke of missed opportunities, of the price of greed, of hope. I told them about their daughter's accomplishments. Their eyes shone with pride and pain. Margaret never reached out. She refused visitors. She died in prison, alone. I attended her funeral, a simple service with more guards than mourners. I stood by her grave and laid a single lily atop the dirt. "We had love once," I whispered. "I'm sorry it ended this way." I felt no hatred, only sorrow for what could have been. One crisp autumn afternoon, as leaves reddened and the sun cast a golden glow, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees. A young boy rode his bike down the street, laughing. A couple walked their dog. The world was at peace. Emily and Lucy arrived with their children, my great-grandchildren, who tumbled into my lap, all giggles and questions. "Tell us a story, Great-Grandpa," one of them begged. I chuckled. "What kind of story?" "A real one," he said. "One with a lesson." I looked at their bright faces, so trusting, so full of promise. I thought about the stories I had lived through, the lessons I'd earned with blood and tears. I considered telling them about greed and betrayal. But instead, I told them about resilience, about how sometimes the people you love will hurt you, and you will have to decide whether that hurt defines you or refines you. I told them about choosing truth even when it hurts, about helping others up, about setting boundaries. I did not need to fill their hearts with bitterness. I wanted to fill them with wisdom. As I finished, one of them asked, "Did that really happen?" "Every word," I said, ruffling his hair. "And I have a question for you now." They leaned in, eyes wide. They loved questions. It made them feel important. I looked at the children gathered around me, the next generation, bright and unburdened. I thought of the man I had been in that hospital bed, staring at a ceiling and hearing lies disguised as love. I thought of the journey from that bed to this porch, across courtroom floors, and through the shadows of betrayal, and back into the light of family chosen and reclaimed. My voice was steady as I asked, "If someone you love breaks your trust, what will you do? Will you let it make you bitter, or will you stand up, seek the truth, and choose a better path?" They were too young to answer now. But maybe one day, when life tested them as it had tested me, they would remember. Maybe they would choose compassion without naivety, justice without cruelty, boundaries without walls. Maybe they would look at their own children and ask questions that challenged them to be brave. As for me, my story was almost done. The sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the world in dusky gold. I leaned back in my chair, a satisfied tiredness settling into my bones. I had faced betrayal and refused to be defined by it. I had sought justice and found a measure of peace. I had set boundaries and still opened my heart. I had restored my agency and begun a purposeful new chapter. The night air cooled. Stars emerged. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. In the distance, laughter carried through the dusk. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, a lullaby of life continuing. And in that quiet, I turned my last question outward, to you, whoever holds this tale now. If you were in my place, surrounded by familiar faces who planned your downfall, what would you do? Would you sleep or would you wake? Would you sign away your life or fight to reclaim it? And most important, when justice was served, would you have the courage to forgive? Please share your thoughts in the comments.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.